Hi, I'm Andrew. You may know me from the show Worth It, where I'm usually eating with my pals Steven and Adam. Actually, I'm always eating with my pals Steven and Adam in that show. But in making Worth It, we also film in the kitchens of restaurants. We've done over 60 episodes, filmed with over 200 restaurants, spoken with countless chefs, cooks, restaurateurs, food people. And over the years, I've learned a lot just observing how people work, seeing them actually in their kitchens where they do their jobs. And I've noticed all these interesting things that influence the way that I now cook and think about food at home. So in this video, I want to share 10 things that I've picked up on the way that I now do in my own kitchen. The first one has to do with pot lids. This is something that I noticed while filming with Chef Motokichi in Kyoto, Japan. We worked with him actually in many videos, but one thing that I noticed in his kitchen is corks under the handles of all metal lids. I realized that the reason that there's a cork wedged under the handle of these lids is so that when it's hot on the stove, instead of grabbing the handle, you just pinch the cork and the cork never gets hot. So now I've saved specifically corks from sparkling wine or champagne. This is from a Lambrusco, Adam. Fun fact, it's a sparkling red from Italy. Because they have a little bit more of a fatter shape, so they wedge under the handle a little bit more nicely. Okay, time for me to put a cork in it and move on to the next tip. Scissors. Specifically cutting meat with scissors, which is something we've seen in actually multiple episodes where we're eating Korean barbecue. And this tip is not exclusively to cutting meat with scissors, but I think it's more about using the right cutting tool and that it's not always a knife. For example, if I'm making something where I'm going to roast a bunch of chicken along with potatoes and other vegetables and things like that, I'll just take the chicken directly out of the container it came in, snip it, it falls directly into the dish it's going to be baked with, and that way I don't have to dirty up a whole bunch of other stuff. It gets me to the finished state as efficiently as possible. And of course, it's great to find food-specific scissors that break apart so that you can clean them very easily. So the next thing I'd like to share is from Chef Masa, who we filmed with at his restaurant Tetsu in the sushi and burger episode. And the thing that Chef Masa did was actually not in the kitchen, but how he was enjoying cocktails that he really likes. And that was to have only half of a martini at a time and then move on to another drink. He moved on to bourbon. But this idea of having just half of a thing to enjoy it at its optimal state. So the great thing about having a half martini is that that half stays very cold, which is the way that you want to enjoy a martini. So it's not just about having one half a martini, it's about having martini at its best state over and over again. And I think that incrementation is the bigger lesson there. You can take this and extrapolate it out into a lot of things that you do in the kitchen. Like now, I don't do this every time, but sometimes if I'm having a bagel, I'll toast one half, have it with cheese and egg, and then I'll toast the other half, have it with cream cheese and tomato. And that way, it stays very crispy and warm, enjoying each half in its more optimal state. So the next tip I'd like to share is touching meat to tell its doneness by how firm it is. So this is something that I've seen lots of chefs do, usually with proteins like steak or salmon. And it's one of those tips that I've always thought was really interesting, but I never knew how to apply it in my own cooking. And so the thing that I then realized I had to do was to develop for myself an understanding of what texture feels like done when I'm cooking. So even if I was cooking something by a timer or thermometer, I would still press it to see, okay, I know that it's cooked based on the thermometer, but here's how it feels when it's cooked also. So the next time, maybe I can judge it just by touching it. So my lesson here is to just touch your food more often while cooking to develop your own database of textures. And it works for everything, I think. With meat, it's usually the firmer it gets, the more done it is. You can use it with vegetables. The softer they get, the more done they are. And also, food is not as hot as you think it is in a pan. The pan is quite hot, but the top of a piece of protein that's in a pan, you could probably touch it. That's my other lesson. That's a little bonus tip just from me. So the next thing I'd like to share is something I saw in our breakfast sandwich episode. So this was at Squabble in Houston, Texas, where they had this donut breakfast sandwich. They had these donuts made by Chef Drew that would usually be served at the dinner service. And then the next day for brunch, they would take these leftover older donuts that were now a little bit more firm that would then be used to make this breakfast sandwich by Chef Mark. And it was actually preferable to have these older donuts for the sandwich rather than the super soft and fresh ones. That would just fall apart under the weight of a sandwich if you tried to make it with those. An ingredient getting a little bit old isn't necessarily only just getting worse. It could be getting better for doing something else. And an example of what I do at home is making croutons. If I have, the last quarter of a loaf of bread and it's starting to get a little bit stale, but I could probably still eat it for a sandwich, I'll deliberately stop eating it so that instead of having a so-so sandwich bread, I can instead make really great croutons. And if you think about it, there are all of these delicious foods that are based on the end of a life cycle of a product. So croutons really are just the best way to use old bread. And then you have these delicious croutons as part of a great salad, because that's everybody's favorite part of a salad anyway, is the not salad parts. So the next tip is from Pizzeria Mozza, where we were speaking with Chef Nancy about her chopped salad. Everything in the salad was cut to be in a similar size and shape, all being matched so that it made a more balanced salad eating experience. And I think the lesson here is to think about why you're cutting anything into the size and shape it is, and how it complements the other things that you're eating it with. If I'm making a peanut butter and pickle sandwich, I'm gonna cut the pickle into a shape that matches the form of the bread so that the size complements the size of the other things it's being eaten with. And I think this is really just another example of being deliberate with why you're choosing a certain size and shape of something in general. This one is more of an eating tip than a cooking tip. Drink sparkling wine with fried chicken. So in our game day food episode, we went to St. Paul, Minneapolis and ate at a place called Revival, where the chef, Chef Thomas, had a private label fried chicken themed sparkling wine that he served with his amazing fried chicken. And this was a pairing that was kind of unexpected to me, but worked amazingly together. Then coincidentally, when we went to Taiwan to do another chicken episode, in our second location there, the chefs Reebok and Julia also served sparkling wine with their fried food. An amazing combination. It's as simple as that. You have, this rich fried chicken, you're eating it with this light, ethereal, bubbly thing. I know that Adam really enjoys doing this. He literally goes and gets takeout fried chicken and buy sparkling wine to have it with it. And sparkling wine is like the beer of wine anyway, right, Adam? Okay, next tip. So the last three tips are all pasta tips. And they actually all come from the same episode. It was the spaghetti episode of Worth It. And the first tip comes from the first location, Bar Zotto, where the chef at the time, Chef Michel, was showing us how they made their spaghetti. And it was being extruded through this bronze dye. And I had never known this before, but when you see a strain of spaghetti and it has this sort of white, rough texture to the outside, that usually indicates that it's been extruded through one of these bronze dyes, which gives it that irregular surface. And so to notice a strand of spaghetti for the first time a little more closely and say, oh, wait a second, this is why all of this spaghetti that I'd been buying was perfectly smooth on the outside, and that's why this has this irregular texture. And then what is that texture doing for the final dish that you're making? Chef Michel explained that this rough texture will help sauce cling to the strand a little more. So now when I go to the grocery store and I'm looking at what spaghetti I'm gonna buy, you can see, oh, this stuff is very smooth. This stuff has that rough striations on the outside. And now I do like to buy the stuff that has that rough exterior to it. I think it's better. At the next location in spaghetti, we went to a place called Cento Pasta Bar, which is named Cento Pasta Bar over the size of the portions that they serve there, 100 grams, which Chef Abner informed us was kind of the ideal portion for an individual adult human. So I now, you might find this annoying, I weigh my pasta whenever I'm making it at home. Although, to be honest, I'm usually going over 100. But I still like having the reference because I always thought it was very difficult to sort of eyeball in your hand what a portion looks like. And this way I can instead, find a container that'll fit it nicely. And then I can decide for myself what number I feel like today. Sometimes I'm smack on 100. Other times, if I'm cooking for 2, we're pushing 300. You can do the math yourself there. It's simple division. Of course, weighing things is very important in every professional kitchen, but I like having a numerical reference on the day-to-day when I'm making pasta at home. Also, does cooking for 2 sound like I'm pregnant? The spaghetti is beautiful. Okay, so the last tip I want to give is something that we picked up from the last location of spaghetti at Republique with Chef Walter. This is not a new concept, cooking your pasta al dente, which means that it still has a little bit of the hard texture in the center of it. But what Chef Walter demonstrated for us was he pulled a strand of pasta out halfway through cooking, put it on the cutting board, and sliced it in half to show the exact proportion of the spaghetti which had yet to cook. This is, something that I understood was happening to the pasta, it's in hot water, it's slowly cooking, but I never thought to look at this exact visual reference where you could see the cross-section and see what amount of the strand was being cooked and what amount of the strand remained raw. I thought it was a great visual explanation of what is happening when you cook pasta. And so now, sure enough, if I'm cooking spaghetti, I'll grab a little tong action, pull out a strand, usually I'll just bite it in half, and take a peek at it to see what stage I'm at. So there were 10 things that I've learned from making Worth It over the years, watching chefs do what they do. Nothing earth-shattering, but I still think it's interesting to see what you notice when watching professionals do what they do. What do you pick up on? I hope you enjoyed this. If there are any tips that you're gonna take away from this, please let me know. Maybe there are things that you've noticed from watching Worth It or in your own life that you'd like to share as well. I hope you enjoyed. See you later.